so welcome again to the ramp. We were just discussing what the ramp means, and to us, the ramp is actually a door that came down from our Bradley fighting vehicles when we were in the service, but we use that ramp for a lot of different things to like Clayton said, to give each other as much business as we could, and just kind of tear into each other once in a while. But I don't know, we did maintenance on things, we gave classes there, we just sat around and BS'd and just kind of, the brotherhood just kind of seemed to form on the ramp. So that's why we've decided to call this podcast The Ramp, because it's a place where we're going to be able to talk, where we're going to be able to feel better about things, and where we can understand that there is healing from this PTSD issue that we all suffer from. Our podcast is geared towards talking about PTSD, the issues that we have, the problems that we deal with, some of the fixes that we've found, the solutions to our problems. And we've had about 4 podcasts so far. This is our 5th one. And the podcasts in the past have been Greg and I talking about the history of PTSD, and then our own personal issues with PTSD. And then we've had 2 therapists on talking about 2 different sides of the therapy, coming at it from the veterans side, with a therapist from the VA, and then coming at it from the non-veteran side, from a therapist that deals with PTSD patients that got their PTSD from other types of trauma, sexual abuse, police officers, firemen and women, EMT, that kind of stuff. So there's some good information on our podcast so far, and we're excited to have another one. And the guest that we have on today is a friend of my producer, Greg Skinner. So Greg, I'll turn it over to you for some introductions.
Hi, Monty. Clayton McCrary, coming in from his race car in Olympia, Washington. So we had Clayton to be on today because we're doing a Veterans Roundtable where we're going to talk about recovery from PTSD. You know, I have a lot of positive stuff to say. I think I've seen Clayton turn a corner, and I know Monty turned a corner. So that'll sort of be the focus. Clayton's background is he served with me in Operation, what was before Storm?
Shield.
Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm, and then he promptly got out. But he was a gunner in a Bradley in my company in a different platoon, and we've been friends ever since 1990, pretty much. Talk almost every day. But Clayton recently went back to school and finished up a bachelor's degree in which he is now going to be focusing on helping, well, why don't you explain what you're going to focus on? I can't.
It's basically liberal arts.
But I know you've had your own personal experiences with PTSD.
So the transformation going to college definitely had to include my own acceptance and willful participation in healing myself to then help heal others. So I had to figure out a way to do it that worked for my own self, because we're all different. So behavioral health or behavioral sciences would be the focus of my BA, with a veteran focus during my training at school. So basically internships and work studies covered dealing directly with veterans in a crisis response atmosphere. So a semi-clinical environment. And yeah, like I said, it's not an easy thing to talk about. What we're doing, I think, is pretty cutting edge. Because honestly, most conversations like this are in usually a closed group session, and you can imagine it as non-COVID experience. You're in the same room together. It's, 12 to 15, 20 people at a time. Whereas I appreciate this complementary style, which I think teleservices would be bridging into this type of Zoom platform eventually, to keep people safe, and they want to be anonymous.
And by teleservices, you mean?
Say again?
By teleservices, you mean, like, explain what teleservices are for somebody who might not know.
So teleservices could be in replacement for face-to-face during, like, such as a pandemic that we're dealing with now. So it could be certain appointments are usually done by phone. That's considered a teleservice. If it has to be specified to replace an actual appointment. But telehealth would basically mirror exactly what we're doing right now on a secure platform. You have a secure link. No one else can just jump in. And current laws are being bent or opened up to consider this as a permanent structure moving forward to help people who, what if they wreck their car and they're going to miss the next 5 appointments? Well, let's do a telehealth service instead until you get your car fixed and we can get back together in person. So it can be a quick fix for anything other than a pandemic as well.
Nice. So that's Clay's background. It's pretty steeped in this business.
Yeah.
And yep. And I'll let you go back to it, Monty.
Well, just to kind of continue with the telehealth thing, I have been experiencing that with my VA appointments for the last 3 or 4 months.
Awesome.
Unless I have to physically go in to be seen, yeah, it's just kind of like this, Zoom meetings or telephone conversations, and for the most part, I think it's working out pretty good. What do you think, Clayton? Do you think it's working okay for the veterans?
Well, for myself, I do like the one-on-one, whether it might be talk therapy or a group session when we're trying to brainstorm about, it could be a problem totally unrelated to my stress or anxiety. It could just be a shared effort to get through a problem, which kind of helps you process when you leave the group. But for other veterans, I've only spoken with 2 people who have directly set them up with the telehealth service as a referral that they will then eventually go to face-to-face, because that, from what I believe, is those 2 veterans, that's their goal, is they want to have face-to-face, but they are willing to try it out. And only one of them I know is through a VA supported platform. The other one is a civilian provider. So, it doesn't matter as long as you're educated and licensed in the field to provide some therapy or counseling. It's pretty seamless these days. And for anyone listening that is a provider, and you probably, as you spoke in previous podcasts with the therapists, they're probably pretty aware of the fact that they can bill direct services over telehealth now. They don't have to worry about maybe getting a reduced rate or whatever. Actually, people are doing a lot more work to provide telehealth services as opposed to the old way. So
Yeah.
that's my on it.
So this might be this might be a good time for anyone wondering about getting some help to get started. If it's as easy as ordering a book off Amazon, I mean, you know, intellectually is easy, just going online and getting started. Have you seen, I'm not involved with the VA. Of course, I do telehealth, but I do therapy with Cillian. And I have some questions on your guys' thought on that later. And Clayton, I'm not recently educated or done any reporting lately in what's going on. If I needed to get started right now during the pandemic, could I do it just online through your services?
Yeah, pretty much.
Nice. Nice.
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but the 1-800-827-1000 number is the direct line for claims and services, and they can direct you wherever you need to go. They're very friendly these days, and they seem to have a really good attitude. So,
Yeah, that
Well, that's
process
quite
they're starting to make a lot easier over the phone and through the, you know, the teleservices now, because they would rather, I know up there at the VA in Boise, unless you have an appointment, they don't want you coming there.
yep.
So it's they've made it a lot easier to get registered and to start looking for your help over the telephone or online. You know, you can go to the vaadministration.gov website and find your local VA numbers and get started from there. And like Clayton said, for the most part, they are pretty friendly and helpful and want to get you started. So yeah, it's a good thing.
Yep.
So like Greg said, this is just kind of our roundtable today. We are going to tell some stories and maybe some solutions that we've found from the experiences of those stories. And so we want to make sure that the things that we say aren't going to trigger any of us three and trigger anybody that might be listening or watching this podcast. So if you get triggered in any way, please turn us off, come back to it later. We're here to help and not to hinder the process of healing. So we want to make sure that people aren't going in the wrong direction. So Clayton, Greg and I talk about this all the time about doing a buddy check during our podcast. So if you feel at all like you're needing to, you know, cut this short or take a break or whatever, please let us know.
Okay.
So just, you know, I think we all have some similar stories. You guys were in Bradley's together. I was over there as well in a Bradley. So our stories are pretty much the same, I think, although they're the same regardless of where you experience your combat. I was in a group down in Utah that I was the only Desert Storm veteran in that group. The rest of them were Vietnam vets, but we all seemed to share that same one or two experiences that really got our PTSD knocked into our head. Do you care to share a couple of those stories, Clayton, and tell us, you know, how it all started for you, and you know how it's how you're dealing with it now?
Well, I'm dealing with it right in front of you. So if that says anything. So yeah, it's so a path to recovery for anybody's different. Some people can compartmentalize. Some people can talk about it and they're okay with it. Most people can't, um, because it's kind of drilled into us, from basic training. We transform ourselves. So my prior experience to the service, I was perfectly comfortable with weapons. Before I joined the Army, I called them guns. So my jargon and my language started to change, and my respect for a weapon and my camaraderie with my fellow infantrymen, all those things coagulated into a very prideful experience. It was a romantic time for me when I joined, because we were still in peacetime. The Cold War was kind of ending. Reagan made his deal and Gorbachev did his deal, and everything seemed so hunky-dory. I wasn't ready to go to college, so I figure, well, I have a history in my family of the males joining in service, and I found a wonderful 2-year tour to Europe that somewhat mirrored my father's experience during the Berlin conflict. So he was there when the wall went up, and I was there when the wall came down. So
Wow.
it was very just quite a very enriching experience for me when it comes to just pride in serving your country, right?
Right.
So made good friends, found Greg on a cot one day. We became best buddies. And when we trained and went off to the desert, we had a huge budget already, so we were training quite a bit. And literally within 2 weeks of each other, we got an announcement that we were deactivating, and then we reactivated in preparation to go train for the desert. So we knew we were going to go as a peacekeeping mission in Desert Shield. We just weren't sure when. So when we got there, I'll speed it up a little bit. Once we got to our main location, which was kind of near the neutral zone, we were still unsure, but we had to be on the ready because there was constant stimulation from what you could hear, what you could see, what you could literally feel all night was explosions and bombing, and we were kicking ass apparently. So it felt good, but my hackles were up. I was very on the ready. And just to back up a little bit, my experience prior to service with trusting people was kind of thin. I had some, pre-existing conditions, so to speak, dealing with my parents and my upbringing. So that, based on my recovery and my experience with therapy, talk therapy, EMDR, brain spotting, we can cover that more in the future, but I've used all those things, journaling, art therapy, you name it, to get me to be able to sit and talk with you guys and get over the initial feeling I had when you asked me if I'm okay with it. So I feel a lot better now because I am talking about it. And my goal as a new 50-year-old bachelor student, I'm going to go out and hopefully kick some people kindly in the ass to get them to at least learn how to talk about it, learn how to at least deal with it, because recovery is a long path. And honestly, I don't think it's going to go away. So I'm going to get right to the point on what triggered my direct PTSD was a series of, it seemed to me, 3 battles. The first one was basically not much contact. The second one, a lot of contact and having a a Bradley with a turret and awesome vision, you can see quite far away, and you can see a lot of things that a normal ground troop wouldn't see. So looking through the glass out into the desert, watching all the horrific events happening in front of me, you know, people being blown up, people being run over, mass confusion, friendly fire. All those things caused me to take that level of trust that I had in people already and really start to question, what the hell am I doing here and why? And before we knew it, we were done. 72 hours straight of being awake and in contact or on the move. I have 3 or 4 pictures of me and Greg, not immediately after we stopped moving, but when we had a chance to settle and meet with each other again, we were elated. And our looks on our faces, we looked like 2 little preschool kids getting ready to go out on a playground. I mean, we were just tired, happy, and just, I believe, glad to be with each other and done. There's one of them,
There
but I
you
don't
go.
think that was the
Yeah.
exact moment. But I wish I had those pics with me right now. I'd pull them up. But anyway, so the basically the 72-hour conflict caused a lot of problems. Being shot at is one thing when you're in a vehicle, but then when you realize that it's affecting, like, oh, they just hit my water jug. Oh, like, these guys are for real. I didn't lose trust in my own people, but in just the whole reason why we were there,
Yeah.
you know? So I don't want to ramble too much about it, but if we need any more specifics on that time during in 1991, you know, it's been quite a long time and a long road for me to be able to just, not casually, but feel good about talking about it.
So, you know, given that part of the idea of this is that no two PTSD is the same. Part of what we're talking about in terms of healing, my PTSD is different than your PTSD, is different than Monty's. And in particular, interesting because you and I served in the same company, different platoons, and sometimes in different locations as a result of that. But you talked about your trust. And one of the things I wrote down to talk about was, you know, how the PTSD manifests in each of our lives is a way to talk about how it is different for each of us and how we each heal differently. But one of the things I wrote down is funny to me because where you went, is I wrote that I fight with bosses that I don't agree with. Clayton doesn't trust anyone, so he assumes everybody's out to fuck him over, right? And that was the way you entered and engaged with so much of the world for quite a long time. You don't anymore. But in that there's no two PTSDs the same, I'm wondering if you might say one little bit more about the trust issue and how, you know, remember how, like, I'd go to the VA and have one experience and then you'd go and have a completely different experience, which increased your frustration. And like, you got past that trust in order to even begin to have a functional relationship with the VA?
Oh God. Well, that's an awesome question, and it took me a long time to figure it out. I traced it back to my experience with my mom bringing me to see the doctor or the nurse or a clinic or whatever. She was obsessive about it. And she also told me that she didn't trust them. You know, a lot of those things carried over into my view of the world, obviously, but then my own personal experience with my mom and trusting her caused, you know, a separate level of just who do I look up to? Who can I trust? You know, so you know, in a nutshell, when when I entered service, you know, I was just looking to distract myself as a young man and enjoy in my time in serving. But when I got out, carrying that trust into the civilian world, uh, it it really was like honestly furthest from my mind, because I was so used to burying the ability to trust someone, uh, if that makes sense. So when my mom passed away, you know, six plus almost 7 years ago, my view, it was a huge weight lifted. So my pre-existing condition of dealing with my mom and trust in life, and then taking on now a role as the elder in the family. Now that my mom is gone, I'm now the oldest in the representation to my children. I had to take that wand or that baton or whatever, that torch, and light the way forward without that baggage that I was carrying, you know. So it caused a lot of opening of trust to a therapist that I had been seeing for years. I admittedly told her that I did not trust you the first year or two that I was seeing you. And she's like, well, why are you seeing me? I said, well, your technique, your methods, you know, I can't find any better. And we've built that relationship together. So it has a lot to do with building a relationship, which I hope you and Monty have built with your either counselor or even peers who are willing to chat and talk, you know. Um,
You know, we talked to Debbie about that, Greg, if you remember. The two things that I wanted to bring up is, Clayton, you mentioned getting to the point where you feel comfortable about just talking about this stuff. You know, I'm like you. I went 15 years after I got out of the service before I went to see a therapist, and my first experience in there wasn't very good at all, and almost didn't go back. But you know, we talked before about having a therapist or a counselor or whoever you talk to be a good fit for you and make you feel comfortable and make you trust them a little bit with, you know, your feelings and your outlook on life as far as what PTSD has done to you. And that's not easy to let that out and to let someone see that you're vulnerable in that aspect. So yeah, that's a good point, and it's a huge step, I think, for all of us when we get to that point where we feel comfortable about talking about this stuff. And it's and you know, for me, I think regardless of how many times I tell the story, just talking about it makes me feel better. Uh, and it's not the experience I feel better about. It's just being more comfortable about um, dealing with that experience. I think that EMDR therapy is geared towards that, if I remember that correctly, because it makes you go over those events over and over and over in your head. If I'm thinking of the right one. Um,
yeah, yeah, to me, my first experience with it was shortly after it came to light, I believe in 93, 94, with the rapid eye movement desensitization. It was really kind of new agey to me. It felt weird. I didn't respond to it well. I tried hypnosis. I did not respond to that well. And even my closest friend at the time and an ex-girlfriend, she thought I was crazy. She said, you're bluffing, you're fooling yourself, you know. And you know, I'm no longer with that person because she was not a positive light in my world for trying to heal. And she had no idea what I was doing because I honestly didn't know what the hell I was doing.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and this was in 97, 98, so my first experience that Greg mentioned going to see the VA, he encouraged me to go in Colorado Springs, and I went to see the local office. It was, I barely remember the visit, but I remember them showing a willingness to help, but I just wasn't ready. I was still kind of down with the man and everything around me, no trust. So it took a lot to bring it back. Greg has been a big proponent of encouraging me, along with other close friends and people in my life. So to just mention it, Greg would say, "Oh yeah, I don't know why you're having such a weird experience," but just touch on it. Greg might have had a fairly decent upbringing, or just overall, he didn't have anything impressed on him going to a clinic. Whereas me, I'm like, what? Something's wrong with me. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to be told something that could be wrong, because of misdiagnosis, all that stuff, especially with mental health.
Yeah. Yeah.
EMDR has now bridged into brain spotting, which is a more relational way of dealing with the client. So the provider-client relationship is less subjective to the process of EMDR, which basically separates the provider's human ability to coincide with what the client needs. So EMDR might work for a little while, but it's very limiting. So brain spotting is just as subjective in the sense of you're talking about the issue, you're replaying the dates, the times, the occurrences in your mind with the support and trust in the relationship. So you can't just walk in day one. This is, like 8 to 16 week process, I think, for someone to even really start to understand how it would work for them. So anyway, I love to ramble, Monty, just so you know, about this subject. So don't let me take up too much time.
No, that's perfectly all right with me. That's what this round table is about, is to, get information out there, to not only help us three here, but to help people that are listening to the podcast or watching the podcast. So yeah, don't feel like you're rambling, because you've got, with your education that you're going into now, you've got a lot more information about this than I do. And I'm not sure about Greg, but Greg's always been a smarter guy than I have, so he probably knows more about this than I do. So
He's trying.
you talked about when the ground war was over, and you and Greg finally got to see each other again. I bet you that was on the ramp, wasn't it?
Well, when I spoke of those pictures, because we were in separate platoons.
Oh.
We honestly, we had to find time for each other. Honestly, it was like a date. We would have coffee together at certain times, and and I would come back to my platoon that I hardly ever spent time with, because honestly, outside of my crew, I didn't have anything to talk about with them. But me and Greg had a great bond and a likeness of sorts that we carried through. I don't know what it was to this day. Maybe I'll figure it out before I die. But when we first got together after the ground war, I believe because we had one or two other friends. One is his last name is Flack, and the other one is Ash. And they, I believe, were with us taking the pictures. They were taking the pictures of me and Greg just being silly. And he was on my shoulders, kind of leaning hard to the left, and I'm trying to hold him up while we're posing for the shot. And we just looked like two little kids. Even though we have stubble on our faces, we looked like little boys just enjoying our time together, Yeah. And I was elated, just to make it through that.
Greg, why don't you relate some stories to that as well? Tell us how you felt during that time.
Well, there's a funny story that I told many times from that very same moment. Clayton remembers it his way, and I remember it mine, and I remember all that same, that joy and that thrill because we got through it, right? A ceasefire. Woo, is my Bradley commander, Sergeant Crabtree, took that. They called the ceasefire. He popped down, I popped my hatch open and handed him the camera and said, take my picture. Because I wanted a picture of just that moment. It's over, as far as we knew. And I guess there's two things that I can remember. Is while I was on Clayton's shoulders, and I have a picture of that somewhere around here, during the celebration, I thought to myself, oh shit, somebody else is going to have to come here and finish. Because when they called, we were on their way to Baghdad. We were going to go crush Saddam. That was our next move. When we got done, I think our last battle that I can remember was Medina Ridge, and then we were heading for Baghdad. So, and it's fun because then, of course, I went on to have a journalism career, I guess, because my mind goes there. But in that moment, I knew this younger person someday down the road was going to have to go back there and finish up what we could have finished then. And that's not hindsight. That's the thought I had in that moment. And then, the rest is joy. Holy shit, we got through it. But that's sort of my primary memory from that moment, was the realization that this is not over. And of course, it was 12 years later, and they sent some kids over there to finish it up. Yeah, and I guess that's not. Yeah, that's bullshit. So I guess that still bothers me. They could have just let us finish it, for Christ's sake. Come on, we were all right there,
Yeah, I've always wondered that myself, why they didn't just let us go in and take care of that stuff. But, I read a book shortly after that was written by, I had the author's name in my mind just a minute ago, and now I can't think of it. But it's called The Commanders, and it talks about the things that led up to that war and different things. But one of the things that President Bush stood by was his objective was to liberate Kuwait. And when that happened, we weren't quite into Baghdad yet, but the mission that he wanted us to do had been accomplished. So that's why we stopped when we did. But I don't know, things may have been different had they let us go in and finish it. They might be different nowadays, but you never know. You never know what would happen. I hate to see anybody sent into those kind of situations where they come back wounded, or or that they don't come back at all. I belong to this PTSD group on Facebook, and some of those people are just having a terrible time. There's been 3 or 4 that we are suspecting have committed suicide because we don't hear from them anymore. We haven't heard from them in quite a while. So, yeah, it's a tough thing to think about. If they had let us go into Baghdad and finish things, would that kind of stuff be going on now? But who knows?
Well,
Go ahead, Greg.
Oh, I was just saying that, it's always troubled me that a no-name, uneducated private, I think I was an E2 at that point, had that realization. And then to, later I got an education and I can better assess what at least the president's point of view at that time. But I can't help, along the way throughout my career, there was a few things, and by career, I mean my military service. There were a few things that were glaring to an uneducated private. And so it leads, maybe a little bit of the distrust with Clayton. A lot of distrust, not because of the Army, but because I had it. I was very suspicious about a lot of the stuff that went on. And so I do think, personally, that was a giant mistake. And we would have been done with Iraq. I can't speak to the rest of, but, by at that point, if they would have let us finish, we would have obviously captured or killed Saddam, and ended it. The thing is that was a real war, right? Like everybody had on uniforms and it was soldiers fighting soldiers. And of course, innocent people were hurt to some degree because no war happens without that.
Yeah.
But it was constrained by the rules of war, mostly Geneva Convention style. And so, boy, that was a whole lot better than that bullshit that they, found in 2003. When apparently nobody learned any lessons from our fighting there on how to deal with our Arab brothers and sisters and their culture, right? I think personally that had we been allowed to finish, that it would be a different world. I'm not saying we wouldn't be at war, but we'd been done with Iraq. Clayton, you got a thought on that? I mean, you're the one that served the least amount of time between the three of us. And your worldview might be drastically different.
Oh, I definitely think the world would be much different. And I highly doubt we would be here right now if we continued forward. I do agree with Monty on the fact that we were there for one mission, not to piggyback onto another one and continue. I think if the call to say Kuwait was liberated, we probably would have gone further in, but I don't think we were prepared to go much further just yet. But we were I knew we were preparing to occupy the area for quite some time, especially when we left a gazillion amount of dollars worth of gear, both burned and unburned. So there was a signal to me that, oh wow, we're starting over again, because we were the first peacetime army to go back into war in quite some time. So we've had this dual view of like, we know we can kick some ass, but my own view with influence from my outspoken platoon sergeant, who thought he was Foghorn Leghorn. He was very critical of the government, was very critical of our leadership, and that we, with Polanco, we agreed quite a bit on some of the craziness that was coming out of Washington, D.C., and we experienced it when George Bush's son came into office and Dick Cheney was right there to lead the way. It was confirmation bias for me at that point. And not to say I was feeling like I told you so to the world, but I was really feeling quite sad for quite a while. So you know what I did? I just, you know me, I hit the bottle. When 5 o'clock came around, I'm ready. I'm ready to forget about the day and not remember anything from the past. Let's move. Let's move.
So then that, that goes into our to continue on with our discussion here. Even though you weren't in the military, thinking back on, what coulda, shoulda, happened back when we were stopped. and then seeing it start up again, and that makes you, like you say, hit the bottle or what, a lot of us turn to that, alcohol, drugs, whatever it might be.
Yep.
So how did that affect then your personal life, like your family relationships, your recreation? Did that then start to affect that stuff? Or
Oh,
did
yeah.
it affect that when you first got out and not waited till, W started his stuff?
Oh, I was into it right away, from the time I came home, and was welcomed by my mom and my two best female friends that I've ever had in my whole life, besides my wife, of course. They were my childhood and high school friends. Greg did meet one of them who we did have a short relationship together, and we're still friends to this day. So they greeted me, and I had this really weird, very surreal feeling that um, I'm home, but why can't I? Why can't I stop the recording in my head? Why can't, a lot of questions were coming up, and all I did was escape from it by turning to um, drugs and friends immediately. I got arrested twice that summer after I got out, um, for drugs. One of them was just being at the wrong place at the right time, um, and a very negative experience was happening near me, and I just happened to be ripped on alcohol and acid while a cop was talking to me. So basically, he didn't take me to jail, but he schooled me a little bit. Luckily, because we went to school together in high school, and he knew that I didn't deserve to be locked up, but I was still charged. So anyway, yeah. So family relationships, they were somewhat superficial to me. I couldn't connect uh, with people other than just making plans to go hang out and spend time together and distract basically me from my own thoughts. Uh, it was much easier for me to spend energy and time trying to gather with other people and go out, throw a kegger, go see a ball game, and try and sneak in as much alcohol as we can because the beers are $8.50. All that crazy stuff. Just any way to get um, away from reality. So luckily, I had a good supportive network of friends who helped me find and keep and maintain a job. But my respect and trust and my individual nature wasn't there in the job. It was just like money, money, money. That's the only reason why I'm here. You're not going to catch me volunteering. You're not going to catch me wanting to show empathy. Um, but I did start to dabble in external group events that were connected to one of my jobs, which was at MCI, the telecommunications service. And I had in the past volunteered for a Special Olympics event. And they asked me, because I had put that on my resume when I first got hired at the company. So they came to me directly and said, hey, we noticed that you have experience working with Special Olympics. Well, we're sponsoring the event. We need you to lead a team of people. And I did it. And so that, I think, started to give me a little sense of hope with people, because Special Olympics, if folks don't know, it deals with folks who have special needs. When I was a kid, no offense to folks who might think this word is bad, but retarded, that's what I was told those people are, is that they're slow and they're dumb and they don't know any better. But they're not. They're the most honest, caring, empathetic people you can ever meet. They look at life like a child, and they tell you honestly how they feel with no BS, no care other than to engage. And that experience, I believe, was in 93 or 94. So it was 3 years after I got out of service. I was still heavily drinking, and I remember being very hungover that day during the Special Olympics event. But my learner, my competitor who I supported personally during the event, they showed me how one can push through a struggle that they've been doing their whole life. And that humbled me greatly. And that I think put me on a road to wanting to attend to more of my own issues. I just didn't do it readily through the clinics that were available, because they still, I felt, were treating me like a science experiment versus a solution-oriented process, which is happening nowadays, right?
Yeah.
But family, and I'll cover family real quick. So my family issues didn't get much stronger after that. They basically got worse because I didn't stick around in close proximity to family. I moved basically as far west as I could, thanks to my buddy Greg. And I always had a glimmer of hope to go out west and check it out, and it was everything that I wanted and more. So I stayed here and promised myself that I would never go back east other than to visit. But I'm here to stay, and I thank Greg and other people that have supported me along the way, to get me to where I'm at, and enjoy my time where I'm at. I'm sure I could do it back in Connecticut where I was raised, but I've done so much here, and I have so much obligation with my kids, and disruption through the pandemic is enough for us. We don't need to be moving anywhere.
Yeah. What about you, Greg? You've talked about this before. The PTSD and your journalism career. I know you had some trust issues, I think you called it, and that kind of, you had to deal with that through your journalism career. Is that correct?
Yeah, my journalism career didn't help. So like my trust issue, like I'll put it into a little story. The three of you know Mac, and the two of you know this story, but we'll share it anyways. Like, so when I first got into the Army, I had come out of the National Guard, and I joined the Army and went to Germany, got the same deal as Clayton, a little bit after him. And I got there, and I had a platoon sergeant who hated white people, but very specifically hated me because I was not very intimidated by him. I'm from Chicago, so I'm just not naturally just scared of black people, right? Even intimidating ones. And I pushed on him, and he just, he came, and I was always messing with me and making me do crazy shit and trying to mess with me. And then we got sent to the war. And instead of training us, he was playing pinochle and fucking off, and just mostly looking after himself and his needs and desires. And we in my platoon, Clayton was not in this platoon, but he's heard about all this stuff. There were plots to kill him. And there were plots to kill him immediately as soon as we hit combat, because nobody trusted him, right? So this was real. Like, Clayton's still friends to this day with one of the main plotters, right? In terms of like trust issues, because I saw the mismanagements, I saw the not caring, I saw the self-interested, and in this case, that all could lead to my death, speaking of being self-interested. So it left a pretty heavy on me. And then when I got out of the service and started heading towards journalism, I immediately started to see in public offices the same fraud, waste, and abuse that I saw everywhere in the military. And so I started doing stories about it because it was easy for me to see it for whatever reason. I mean, other people, I guess they didn't see it, but, you know, having been part of a bureaucracy, you know, and so I started to build my career on that. And that I'm not making any friends in any communities ever a reporter in, because I would show up and there would be all these stories about local scandals because the fraud, waste, and abuse is everywhere. You know, and so that starts to weigh on me. Jesus, you can't trust anyone, particularly in the government. And then eventually I started to see the same fraud, waste, and abuse in newspapers themselves, inside of my own organizations and our own organizations. And so I started to stand up against organizations. And that did me no favors. I mean, it cost me several jobs. I mean, it ended up cutting my pay in half. It really started to isolate me inside my career. And of course, the whole thing was based on my sense of ethics, right? We've talked about it in past episodes, that my greatest sin was not helping a child in a time of war. It's a great ethical violation in my own self-view. And after that, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not doing that ever again. And so it equated to me, because the importance of journalism in my mind and its role in democracy, to see all this fraud, waste, and abuse going on, and people asking me to look the other way. Mayors, governors, cops, you know, senators, teachers, school board members, and then publishers, editors, you know, just there's a few places I worked that the ethics were strong. I worked in Boston and the ethics were very strong there. I was proud to work with all of those people. And guess what? They actually liked me, right? It's pretty funny. Even if I stood up to them on something ethical, they were like, right on, you know. It was the most professional place I ever worked. That was Lynn item on Boston's criminal-ridden North Shore. Had a great time there. But most of the places I worked were out west, and there was not a lot of ethics. And I think, you know, Clayton's heard these stories over the years. He's visited me of, you know, being editor, reporter all around the Western United States. And I just always got into trouble because I'm not willing to bend the ethics. And so that hamstringed my journalism career, interesting enough. Yeah, it's too ethical. People didn't like me.
Well, I have to ask you this question, since I was your platoon sergeant at one time too. There were no plots to kill me, were there?
No, boss. No, there was never a plot to kill you.
Oh, and
I'm almost a little sorry I said that out loud on tape, but it's just the truth. It's just the truth, you know. And somebody was in charge of shooting Dean J. Murphy as well. But he was a squad leader that would have immediately taken over after Mac, and so it was two layers deep, just with regards to trust, like who's going to get us killed. And we eventually got rid of that sergeant. A bunch of privates got together. We did some misbehaving, and it falls under this old theory of the power of the private. That if the people you're in charge of are messing up so much, it must be your fault. So he got removed, and we got a new platoon daddy who took control of the situation. We started training, and then we were happy to follow him. So everything got back in line, and there were no more conspiracies to hurt anyone.
Well, I remember when
do you remember that, Clayton?
Yeah.
I remember when I hit that lieutenant. We were out in the field, and Doc Gardner had given me a shaving profile out there. And because I hit that lieutenant, I don't know if you remember this, Greg, but he actually relieved me of my position at that time. And so I had to come back in and talk to the commander. Well, here I am with a big, 5 days worth of growth on my face and all that kind of stuff. Well, they gave me a reprimand, but, the commander knew that I was, maybe it wasn't right to hit the lieutenant, but I was in the right and the lieutenant was in the wrong. And so he presented me back to my platoon as being the platoon sergeant, and the whole company clapped. Well, that lieutenant pulled me aside later on that day, and he says, to have that much devotion to one person is dangerous. And I thought, well, I don't know if it's dangerous as much as it is, you got, they weren't devoted to me necessarily. They were devoted to us as a team. And we did have that trust, and we did like doing things together. And we won a couple of Top Gun awards, as I recall, in that platoon when you and I were together. And so that's what it said to me. I mean, I felt happy that they felt happy that I was back in charge. But the way I looked at it was, they were happy that we were back together as a team, and that one cog of that team that kept disrupting us finally had to, hit the bricks.
And
But
Bruce, so interestingly, Monty, I remember you punching him in the face, and I was sitting on the ramp when you did it, because we were sitting and having a conversation. We were all sitting there. It's my memory is we were all sitting having a conversation, because I can kind of see it. And the LT came over and pulled you off to say what to you, I don't know, but you were like, in my memory, and I could be wrong, we're 50 yards over there, and we're all sitting on the ramp. I think Gardner was there too, Pat, as you said, Doc Gardner. And it was like, whoa, but I was on the ramp in my memory. So it's a nice, just a little time that even that falls on. And no, I don't think people worshiped you, but I think you had the respect of a lot of people. And I think the result of that behavior when you were brought back was just, that's just leadership, right? People were glad to have their leader back. And as I recall, that lieutenant thought that his leadership was inside the bars. He didn't know that his leadership came from within himself.
Yeah.
Hopefully he went on. In fact, I just found a letter that he wrote me when I left. He saw more than, I guess when he wasn't having a power struggle with you, he saw more about the reality of what it was really about. I don't think he was capable of it, but he could see it.
Well, my philosophy over the years in the service and out of the service was, if I'm ever in a supervisor position, I want people to work for me because they want to, and not because I'm the guy wearing the stripes. And when that particular instance happened, that kind of told me that, I was kind of on that right path, that people were working for me because I treated them well and they liked working for me, and their, their production was better, their quality of work was better. And yeah, I mean, I hate to blow my own horn, but it did make me feel good that people felt that way about me. But anyway, let's get past that. So
My therapist would say you need to acknowledge all that good stuff about yourself.
well, it's hard sometimes to think that, that you're doing good things. I mean, it's nice to know it, but it's hard to kind of acknowledge it out loud, I guess. So let's
And
kind of move on.
I think
No, go ahead, Greg.
I was just going to say, I think it's even a little harder for people with PTSD to find that positivity and to float on that positivity a little bit within themselves.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and that kind of goes into our next discussion here about how things have helped us get to where we're at now. I know we talked a little bit earlier about being able to. We've got to the point where we can talk about this stuff, but Clayton, tell us a little bit about how you got to that point. What did you have to, is there any instances that you can see specifically that either helped you over that hump or just kind of led you up to that point to where you felt like you could talk to other people about it?
Well, my first experience with counseling in this capacity would be a direct result of me getting arrested for the fourth time in a domestic violence case, which, I wholeheartedly accept the responsibility, but I was attacked by my partner, and in the state of Colorado, the law was to take the male. So they took me, and I explained my experience, and they said, well, you're in your right to have the attacker go to jail too if you want to press charges. I didn't, because my goal was to just get out of the relationship. By court order, which is not what the therapist at the time wanted me to tell her as we were giving introductions to the rest of the group therapy. But she said, introduce yourself and don't tell me you're here because of a court order. So you know what I did? I said, I'm here because of a court order, but I want to be here because I know I have issues. I replayed all the scenarios as to what led up to the actual incident that got me into the therapy. I shared that with the class. I made a huge connection, who actually I just spoke with this counselor who I haven't talked to in 20 years. We just talked about 4 months ago. So we're still keeping in touch, semi-professional. She connected with me. I had to go through 36 weeks of what they would call anger management group therapy. She thought that I could do better on a one-on-one, and we found that I was good with both, one-on-one and group therapy, but she thought that I would do better one-on-one. So I completed and did 4 more weeks with her outside of the 36-week program to not convince her or me that I'm okay, but that I am on a path to understanding what's going on. So, and that was right about 2001. And from there, I was still struggling with the VA. I was obviously having a good experience with the civilian counselor, therapist, provider. So I kept that in the back of my head, I might have to go there. But with insurance and all those things, it kept me for a while from trying to attend to it. Some years later, after I met my now current wife, Nicole, she suggested that, during the time when my first child, when we were pregnant, we hadn't had our first child yet, and I was recently laid off. So I had time to go to the VA and attend to what Greg was trying to get me involved, which was the Persian Gulf Clinic up in Seattle, which I believe is still going on to this day. He said Greg had a good experience. Of course, I didn't. I criticized and scrutinized everybody in that office. including the doctor, the therapist, the psychologist. It was it was really a truly uneventful moment for me. Um, they messed up my last four. They messed up my address. They messed up my phone number, my email, everything. So uh, uh, I had a baby. So I kind of gave up on dealing with myself and tried to deal with being a new parent. I ignored my problems for a little bit longer. I had a new job. It was very supportive of raising a family, had good benefits. So I just rolled with it. I walked right into the job, and within 3 months, I was the operations general production manager on the farm. Just from my previous background, I just had to show the first 3 months of what my boss called the school of hard luck, trying to learn the process. And then they gave me an immense raise that blew me away. It was huge. And I stayed there for almost 10 years. Um, I lost my shit 3 times at that job on coworkers who were not subordinate, but of equal or greater value than me within the company, because I was calling them on their shit. I was getting sick and tired of what Greg would call waste and fraud and other bullshit that just kind of bleeds into even what you would think would be the most harmonious and holistic, organic company that you could ever find. It exists everywhere, unfortunately, because that's the American way.
Yeah.
So during that time, though, they had great insurance. I was able to get into a little bit of a relationship trouble with my wife, and I said, well, okay, I need to start seeing someone. So with a referral, I am still to this day seeing the same person who I have exited and stopped seeing for twice for 2 different periods of my own accord, and of course learning the hard way. And now we have telehealth, teleservices on the phone. She's a great person. She's a PsyD. Her husband works at JBLM at the Fort Lewis military base as a current and new emerging EMDR and brain spotting therapist. So between him as the husband of my therapist, with my blessing, they share a lot of new and emerging therapies with me, and me as a student, and being a very progressive minded person. I honestly have built a relationship that was much greater than I could have ever experienced. So I think we've been together now off and on, but regular since 2010, thereabouts.
Well, that seems like a pretty long road for you. And I think we all have that same kind of, well, not kind, but I mean, we're all kind of on that same road where, because of one experience or another with the VA, we get kind of knocked off track on our healing process. We know it needs to be done, but we seem to be handling things okay. But then other things pop up, and yeah, I mean, I stayed in the service for a little over 20 years, almost 21 years. And, I look back on that. I didn't start seeing a therapist until 15 years after I got out of the service. But that was still, I didn't get out of the service until 10 years after the war. So, I dealt with it a little bit when I was still in the service. I look back on things I did, at work, things I did with my family, and I can see now that the cause for those were because of my PTSD. And I didn't realize it while I was in the service. My wife tried to get me to go to see a therapist at the VA for years and years. And finally, one night, I woke up out of a nightmare and was crying. And, she says, you just need to go see somebody. So I finally went in to see a therapist, and my first experience wasn't very good, but I went back to see Debbie, and Greg met Debbie on one of our podcasts, and she's the one that kind of got me through it. I didn't expect much from her at first, but boy, she was a good fit for me, and she has made me get to the point where I'm at now, given me tools to deal with this stuff. And so yeah, I've come quite a long ways in my journey as well.
Oh yeah, you're doing a podcast.
Yeah, yeah. And I told her, and I've been texting her, she's wants to come back on and do another podcast with us, but I told her, I said, I have to give you a lot of the credit, because uh, if not for her, I wouldn't be talking to anybody about this. So yeah, it's been a good thing.
Good.
What about you, Greg? We'll kind of wrap this up with your recovery stories.
So I think the first thing where I started to get somewhere, I first went to the VA for my head in '96. I was with my past partner, Alan Miley, who Clayton knew. We basically know everybody in each other's lives, since he found me on that cot all those years ago. And so in '96, I did a little group stuff, a little one-on-one. Yeah, but not ready. But in 2000, I had a rough relationship situation, and I was real bent. And so I went to see a therapist at my school, private therapist at my college. And she immediately was like, "Holy Christ, you need to be, we're going to push this. You're going to be here once a week. We're going to get as much done as we can, because school was going to end, and then I wouldn't have the coverage." And she did EMDR, and really keyed in, picked up on, to that little girl who I didn't help in the desert, which is a big theme of my PTSD. And she did EMDR with me to forgive that, or to get through that situation. And so that was the first. And I still didn't know what was going on, but it worked. I still have a concept of where I am now, but that started to work. And then I continued to pursue my career. And so I wasn't working on me. I just kept going back into stress situation after stress situation, and fighting with everyone, from city hall to editors to publishers to the cops to anybody who was, willing to tangle, I suppose.
And me.
And it didn't help. Huh?
And me.
Yeah, well, yeah, I got you. And that didn't help. And so there was that, I got some help, and then I went into this because I was confused with that was a useful skill set to have, was to be able to be like that always and forever, hyper alert, combative, willing to, I used to tell people, pull the pin on a hand grenade and just see what happens. When I would have standoffs with cops, or standoff with the sheriff, or a standoff with the mayor, I had standoff with senators, and you just look them right in the eye and say, well, let's pull the pin out, see what happens. We'll see who's right, And so that's a lot of ego, but that's also a lot of what I learned how to deal with things in the service, was very, but eventually, oh yeah, then I got married and got a baby, and then got a divorce. And then my career collapsed, and I got fired. And then I had some court-ordered therapy, but I was pretty crafty because I had insurance. I said, can I just go to my own therapist? And I found a very good, again, civilian therapist who helped me get on track. But it still didn't get to the real healing for me. The real healing started when I my now wife and started to look at Eastern philosophies, and then again to a civilian therapist, where we focused on just forgiveness, like everything is, and it jives with a lot of Buddhist stuff. Is what I'm mad about, I have this sense of justice and injustice, and for Christ's sakes, they put me in that war where we had to be just or unjust, but the three of us all know something about ourselves after having done it, whether we're just or unjust people, and only we can know that. But it became really important to me, a little too much. And then, so learning about forgiveness, forgiving myself for not helping that kid, forgiving Clayton for being just a general douchebag, forgiving you for punching that lieutenant, forgiving Saddam, forgiving George Bush. And what ended up happening is that with me forgiving all this stuff, it took my trigger away. And it's not that I don't get triggered. It still happens a little bit. Occasionally, if somebody tries to kill me with a car on the highway, I can get a little combative. But for the most part, and in the process of that, I came up with this thing, and I've said it to Clayton a bunch of times, and I think I've said it to you too, is the realization that nobody's trying to kill me, right? I'm living in this world, and nobody's trying to kill me. And so that changes the consequences too, and in the ability to just have forgiveness for like everything. If I don't like it, forgive it. What do I got to be pissed off about? I sure as hell don't have to engage with it. It's easy for me to, I don't have part of the last thing I'll say is I was fortunate enough to be able to do it, but I think anyone can do it, is wrapped up in all of that PTSD was a constant putting myself around stressors. My career path was stress, the Army was stress, my activities were stressful. And now I don't do any of it. I still have fun activities, but I don't do it stressful. So I took the stress out too. And the stress being a trigger to get protective and to go on the offensive, to attack, to fight, so basically that, I guess 3 things: EMDR, forgiveness, and self-care.
I think that, I'm glad you brought up that forgiveness. I think that's a good thing for all of us that deal with PTSD, because one of the things that our triggers cause almost all of us is anger. And if we have that forgiveness, that anger kind of is abated at most of the time. We still get angry at things, of course, but I think in my case anyway, Greg, I told you I was deployed over to the Middle East 3 times, in addition to the wartime that I was over there. And my experiences over there were not very good. And I was angry at, number one, having to go over there more than once. And number 2, those people. I was angry at those Arab people so bad for so long that it just tore me up. And I had to get to that point where, I had no reason to be angry at any of them. And I had to, tell myself and convince myself that there was just no reason for that. So I think that forgiveness is a big thing for us because it keeps that anger at bay. Well, it seems
Yes, and anger is I'm just wanting to include that anger is the root of every altercation that every veteran I know with PTSD is. It's common there. So it is the one thing. Everybody's PTSD is different in a lot of ways, except for that, I guess. For at least for us veterans, is we can all talk about the angry bit. Yeah. So
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you, Monty.
No, that's fine. Well, Clayton, I want to thank you for coming on our podcast with us. I hope that you'll consider coming back on our roundtables. You're going to have some good information for us as you continue your education, and I wish you the best of luck with that. The world needs some good therapists out there, and sounds to me like you're wanting to help as many people out there as you can, like we're trying to do here. So thanks again. I appreciate you coming on and appreciate your stories, and I'm glad that you and I have old Gregory in common here, so I have a chance to meet you.
Yeah.
I didn't find Greg on a cot, but I told my company commander that I wanted him in my platoon when nobody else wanted him. So I guess we have kind of a bond too.
Oh yeah, no doubt. He's the washed up dog that nobody wants, but we took him in. We took him in.
That's right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up this episode of The Ramp. We want to thank everybody that might be listening or watching our podcast here. We have our Facebook page called The Colorblind Army Guy. We encourage you to go on to that Facebook page. Clayton, I would ask you to encourage the people that you talk to visit that Facebook page if they're on Facebook. We have our podcasts on there, and we have, I put a lot of different information on there that I think people can be helped by. You know, we talked about with the telehealth and teleservices, you know, being able to go online, and Debbie talked about this, and shopping for therapists out there. And so some of that kind of information is on that Facebook page. We also have an email address for questions or comments or subjects that you might want to bring up. It's called the Colorblind Army Guy at gmail.com. And the Colorblind Army Guy is all one word, no capitals, no spaces. The Colorblind Army Guy at gmail.com. Our next podcast is going to be a good one, as well as they all have been, at least in my opinion. But we're going to talk to a representative of a ranch called the Risen Warrior. And it's a ranch that is been put together by some people down in Utah. I think they said they have about 5,000 acres down there. And they invite veterans to come there for equine therapy and just work therapy. And they've got all kinds of activities, but it's at no cost to the veterans. But we'll have Erica Schlichty is her name. We'll have her on our next podcast, talk about that ranch. So again, this is Monty Garlick, the Colorblind Army Guy, with my producer, Greg Skinner, and our roundtable guest today, Clayton McCary. Thanks again, Clayton, for being with us today, and we'll sign off for now. Pop and smoke.